She may not be the queen of Sheba, but she certainly is the queen of Schema. Little play on words there. Martha van Berkel is co-founder of SchemaApp and one of the foremost authorities when it comes to structured data and linked data. Everyone in the SEO industry is aware that Google's knowledge graph is a big deal. It's a prime example of how Schema can work, but there's a lot more to it than just that. And as Martha points out, the combination of structured data and machine learning is a perfect match. So with all the talk of AI going on, Schema is your website starting point. So let's pick up the conversation with Martha. Martha and I have known each other for, I don't know, a good few years, and have had the opportunity to work together on a few accounts in a very specialized area. And I've talked to a few people today about the importance of structured data, but nobody knows it better than you do.
Well, thank you.
And nobody knows you better than you do. So instead of me telling people who you are, give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So Martha van Berkel, I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of SchemaApp. And we are an enterprise solution for doing structured data at scale and doing it properly in knowledge graphs, which, you know, there's nothing more fun than being at a conference where everyone's talking about AI and machine learning and knowing that if you do your structured data properly, you're really set up for that.
What a help you be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. A lot of people who come into the industry start off as like maybe a web designer or back-end developer or something like that. But you started very early on in this area of structured data. So what was it that prompted you to start this company, the name of which is written right here?
Oh yeah, so isn't it good branding on my part, right?
Absolutely.
So I actually grew up in enterprise, right? So I grew up at Cisco Systems, like the big Cisco,
Yep.
where I did sort of product and innovation. And one of my things I loved was speed. Like I wanted to move faster, do kind of new things.
Which is very difficult to do in an enterprise.
It's really hard to do. Hence probably why I got frustrated when I was there. And my co-founder at the same time is a semantic technologist. And my co-founder also happens to be my husband.
Yep.
And so since day one, date number one, he was telling me about this whole semantic technology and why semantic technology is important. And the definition of semantics is like using language to explain meaning and relationships. And so he was exploring like how does he apply that knowledge and the fact that he's an expert in this space, in a way that the world cares about. And we came across schema.org back in 2011, so this was 2013, and he was like, I actually think like the SEO space, really like they're still learning about this and it's still really new. And so he started playing with it to say like, hey, I think we can generate knowledge graphs, which is like the proper way of doing semantic markup, and hence SchemaApp was born. And at the same time, I was finishing up at Cisco, and I was eager to do something, learn something new, and so I love talking to people, explaining things, and innovating. And so we really sort of matched those two kind of skills that we had, and SchemaApp was born. And at the same time, I was finishing up at Cisco, and I was eager to do something, learn something new, and so I love talking to people, explaining things, and innovating. And so we really sort of matched those two kind of skills that we had, and SchemaApp was born.
So when you started SchemaApp, how much explaining did you have to do to people to? Yeah, I know, it's crazy to explain the difference between what it is that you were doing and the way that the web is linked together compared. So if you think about linked data, is a different way of thinking about how content is linked compared to linked web pages,
Absolutely, yeah. So backlinking's different, right? In fact, I would say backlinking, you might say, is like a first step towards understanding how things are connected. But I think when I started, and I didn't know anything about SEO. So like I was one of those junior people who had no idea, who had to just be like, well, let's figure, like I'm supposed to sell this thing, so like I have to actually do it. So I was like the first customer success manager. I used the tools first, figured out, ask questions on like, well, why do I have to connect these things? And I think if you go back to like how Google works, right? So Google has to figure out how to deliver links or pages that answer questions. And the only way they can do that is if they understand the content. And so the whole idea that like, well, but the content then has to be connected to these topics because people are searching for those topics, and to be of service, which I always love, I always quote you, Mike, on the search engines being service. It has to be able to connect all those dots, like literally that simple language of connecting dots. And the fact is that in those very early days, when I used to pitch semantic search marketing, it was like, you can take control of how you're connecting those dots to let the search engines truly understand. And in 2013, 2014, people weren't ready to understand that. Like, people didn't want to hear that. It really took until 2017 to 2019 really, to where I would say like the majority of people were like, oh, this structured data schema markup thing is actually not going away, and it's hard, so like I guess I better start trying to figure out how to understand it.
So schema.org was the first kind of initiative that involved a few search engines together.
That's
so
right.
That was important.
Yeah.
But the actual uptake by the web developers, website creators wasn't so great at the time because they just didn't fully understand it.
Absolutely.
So Google, the importance of links became known because Google made it known that links were important.
Correct.
But many people don't understand why. And if you take a look at network theory, just like the way that we group together, generally as people, that if you are within a particular group or a category, then you can actually see that more, very, very structured kind of linking between people who work within the same area of business. I honestly think that the study that was done into communities, which is done in network theory anyway,
yes.
Google had done a lot of that, so they know where it's more densely linked, that's a community of people. But that's just one person saying, I think my web page has great content, so I'll link to yours, and vice versa, you might do with that. But in terms of the semantic level, in terms of linking all of this data together, that's where the structured data comes in to actually...
Yeah, you just made me think of linking is like linking at a web page level. You got to get down to like the language.
Boom.
Right? Like when we talk about meaning, you can't just have meaning from a URL, right? You have to have meaning from language, right? And so even things like...
And the connections, the connection
Absolutely.
between...
Well, and this is where, like some of the releases like BERT and MUM is about like understanding the context of that language, which means like you can't just like understand a web page's meaning. You have to get into the words. And what I love about this is like it actually also then plays, well, it's not just a developer's job. It's not just an SEO's job. It's like the content. It's part of like even the company's strategy, because like how you talk about topics, entities, like should all kind of tie back to like what does the business care about? Like what is the business about, right? And what's meaningful to their customer? Like it comes back to it makes it more human actually, which is ironic. We're talking about AI and chatbots and machine learning, because it's like the language is the human aspect, right?
And to get a better understanding of it. So most people would ask you, I'm sure, why should I do this? Will it help me rank better at Google if I do structured data? One of the things that I said, a quote that I made a long time ago, and it's been used time and time again, is that when people were looking at Google and trying to figure out how they ranked things, and they would say, it's a black box. Google is a black box, this algorithm. Nobody knows what goes on inside the black box. And I would say, do you know what? Google's looking at you, and you are a black box, and it's trying to figure out what goes on. So the closer that you two get together sharing some information, the sooner you'll know.
Yeah. So
the linking of web pages together and creating a community, but then understanding the language within that community is where the structured data begins to help, So trying to explain to somebody who's perhaps not as advanced as you are in understanding the technology that goes on, what would be the importance of me as a business owner being involved in a knowledge graph, and how does that work anyway,
Yeah, and actually I got the chance to talk about this like this week at Pubcon. So part of it's about like still your business goals. Like I always like to break it down. If like you're trying to get new leads, new engagement, like and compete, right, against your competition, like you have to like figure out how you show up, right? And the showing up doesn't happen when they get to your webpage. The showing up starts in the search engines. And so my always like first reason for doing it is like, do you want to like have an engaging, just like when you meet a person, right? Like, do you want your result to be engaging and share information that like makes me want to engage? Or do you want to just like have a boring blue link? And the fact is like, if you do structured data, you're going to stand out from the crowd. And then I think the better part is then there's data and ways to measure to say, are those engaging results then converting? And then like the business case is easy, right? Like the answer is yes, they do convert better. You can measure it. And then how you standardize and think about like, well then what do we need people to engage with, right? What are the articles we're writing? What are all the things that I'm investing money in to produce? Like you would want it to look its best. And I think about like when, like you want to make a first impression, right? Like, are you going to work hard to make sure that, like you've got your haircut, you're wearing, your fancy shirt, like you're kind of coming up with a smile and standing tall. Same thing with your search results.
Just wondering about my haircut and my shirt.
You're looking great. You're looking great. Yeah. And then the second reason, and I think this one's the more timely piece is, I recently asked ChatGPT, like, why are knowledge graphs important? And knowledge graphs are like when you connect all your data, that sort of that web, that linked data. And I say knowledge graph because like you can do schema where it's not connected, but like proper connected schema, like what we do at SchemaApp. And ChatGPT was like, because it's foundational for machine learning and AI.
Boom.
Like, so if you don't believe, the chatbot, or believe me, right? Like, but it's really is why actually semantic technology is something that we're so excited about. Because it also increases searchability. It also increases, allows you to bring all that data that's in different places in your company that you put on your website into one place, which allows you to query it better, get insights from it, and intent. And that's why, from a strategic perspective, if you're not doing it today, one, you want to make a good impression, but two, do you want to be, being competitive in this new space? This is, I'll say an early concept, and Bing's going to ask people to change behavior and interact with data differently. You have people can do things today to be prepared for that. So I think so to me that's the urgency now is there because of that change.
So if you look at AI, which is an umbrella term, and people just use it like it was one thing, the schema that you do, the structured data, is actually an element which fits perfectly under
That's
AI.
Right.
The information retrieval, the area that I come, fits perfectly under AI. So people have to understand that it is this umbrella term, and there are so many areas. But in the actual taxonomy, the way that it works at the moment, you have strong AI and weak AI, and we're a long way from strong AI.
That's right.
Yeah, and we have weak AI, and that sounds like it's wimpy, but it's mind-blowing because ChatGPT is actually weak AI because it's in that machine learning area, So it's going to be a while before in the strong AI, which is deep learning, where even Google can look at all of this unstructured data and then make sense and make a decision about that. But if you use structured data from a machine learning point of view, it really helps Google to, boom, understand what this page is about, what area it should be classified, categorized in. It makes a huge difference. So that is getting ready for the future, yeah?
It is. And I think the other thing is you can make it easy, right? We saw crawl budgets from Google be decreased. We know that search engines are inexpensive. They're cheap, right? They're still running a business. And so it's why wouldn't you make it easy and tell them exactly how you want to be understood? Because there is room for interpretation, right? With machine learning and so forth, is it Java, right? Is it the country, is it the code, or is it the coffee?
Yeah.
Is it, I think someone recently quoted me, football. Well, what kind of football? American football? Football like we call in the UK, or is it Aussie rules football? Yeah. Canadian rules football, right? As the Canadian in the room. So I think part of it's also be deliberate. We can be deliberate. And then I'm just excited about where this could also enable other things in marketing, right? Because if you think of it bringing data across all these different places together in a common language, you can actually query it and do other things. And so I'm really excited. We're exploring personalization. How do we pull in taxonomy and language what questions do we want to ask this knowledge graph? And so to me, that's like beyond the SEO, but the business leader cares about that, right?
Oh,
the
yeah.
business leader cares that you're prepared for more than just this
And
tactic.
you can get more visible results. I mean, that's one thing that we haven't talked about. So if
Yeah.
you want those rich snippets and want,
Yeah.
greater visual appearance. I mean, when you think about it in the organic results, and I've talked to a few people here at the conference, everybody beginning to realize that the organic results, when this industry first started, was all about text and text on a page
Yes.
and keywords, but it's becoming much more visual and audio visual now,
That's
and
right.
certainly AR is going to make a difference. And I think when you've got augmented reality aspects of your presentation there, then structured data is going to make a huge difference. So.
Well, and we're seeing like Google, different teams in the Google sphere, like the image team, the ad team,
Yep.
like they're all trying to evolve their experiences. They're using structured data to like
Absolutely.
have that basis, right? It's like a launching point to build more machine learning, to build other things. So no, it's like do it for the tactic, and Google says to do it, right? Like this is not even like it's like documented. Like this is what you should do, right?
Absolutely,
Like
yeah,
I
I was
love that.
gonna
Like
say.
no guessing.
With SEO, you get here are the Google guidelines, which start with do not spam or whatever,
Yes, yeah.
that kind of thing. But with structured data, if you go to the developers area of Google, they give you all of this information.
You just have to do it.
So you could do some yourself. I mean, I do want to say, in all honesty, you and I know each other because we've worked together and we've worked with large clients. One of the things that is really important to me, and certainly it has been in my career, that the areas that you know a little bit about, if you try to explain that to a new client, then you might get it wrong. But if you bring in an expert, a
Yes.
monomaniac, somebody who's passionate about it. So whatever it is that you're doing with structured data, if you have a client that doesn't fully understand it, I recommend you get in touch with Martha, and she'll talk to your client, and believe me, they'll get very excited about it.
Amazing.
Yeah, Martha, lovely to see you.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you at the next conference.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again, Martha. It was a pleasure as usual catching up. Safe travels back to Toronto, and see you again soon.